Okay, so I have 3 articles for you in a list of crap that I could have talked about. I whittled it down to 3, and like I said, they are all crap. So let's start in chronological order. So, first up from Deutsche Welle, we have Palestinian journalists tortured in Israeli prisons. Now, I've heard of other Palestinians being tortured, but I picked this one because this attacks journalists. And it makes it a bit harder for the assholes, which I know are going to attack. It makes it just that much harder to find a reason to justify this. I realize there are people out there who assume that all Palestinians are terrorists, but that's a you problem. So anyway, let's get to the article. A report by the Committee to Protect Journalists, a U.S.-based NGO, lists accounts of media professionals held by Israel since October 7, 2023. Israel has repeatedly denied reports of mistreatment of prisoners. Right, just like they denied what we all saw with our own eyes with that Palestinian journalist who was killed, and Israel tried to claim that, oh, we don't know if it was an IDF soldier. It could have been, friendly fire because it could have been Hamas, whatever. And only to discover, oh, by the way, no, it came from the IDF. So Israel, at least this administration, cannot accept that people don't think that the IDF shits rainbows. The Israeli administration shits rainbows. The IDF shits rainbows. Nothing bad ever happens. They only do stellar work. So, anyway, moving on. A new report by the Committee to Protect Journalists suggests that dozens of Palestinian journalists suffered torture, sexual assault, and hunger after being arrested by Israeli authorities during the 2-year war between Israel and the militant group Hamas in Gaza. The U.S.-based NGO said it had collected 59 testimonies from media professionals detained by Israel since October 7, 2023. All but one of the testimonies reported abuse. According to the group, Israel arrested at least 94 Palestinian journalists and 1 media worker during the 2-year war. Of those arrested, 60 were from the illegally occupied West Bank and 33 were from the Gaza Strip. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that's being illegally occupied too, because I do know that people describe Gaza as an open-air prison. So, anywho, the majority of the journalists held, 48 of them, were not charged with any crime, with Israel holding them under so-called administrative arrest, a legal situation that refers to Palestinians imprisoned without trial and without the opportunity to mount a defense against allegations, with some detainees held for periods of over 2 years without legal due process. Well, now we know where Trump got the idea, or maybe he got it from Russia. At this point, who knows? Fascist will fascist. According to the Israeli NGO Hamaked, Center for the Defense of the Individual, 3,358 Palestinians were held in administrative detention as of February 2026. Of those, 3,308 were awaiting trial, and 1,249 were classified as illegal combatants. Again, these are journalists. This category, as defined by Israeli law, primarily affects Palestinians in Gaza who do not meet the criteria for being held as prisoners of war under international humanitarian law. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not. Because under this administration, I do not believe a word they say. 10 other journalists were charged with incitement, anti-state activity, or promoting terrorism. Now, that sounds bad, but what exactly did they say? Because this is the same administration who, if you say anything bad about Israel, you must be anti-Semitic. Which would mean that a lot of Israeli citizens must be anti-Semitic because they protest this administration. So no, that's not the same thing. That cheapens actual anti-Semitism. So if they can't even do that, how can we believe that whatever these journalists said actually qualifies? As of Thursday, 30 journalists still remain in Israeli custody, according to the CPJ. More than 200 media professionals were killed during Israel's 2-year war in Gaza, according to the United Nations. The report lists several of the testimonies, which include graphic descriptions of sexual, physical, and mental violence. One such testimony is of Ahmed Abdel Al. Abdel Al, who works for the Hamas-affiliated Shabab news agency, according to CPG's Why is my mouth not working? CPJ's website said he had experienced a 5-day period in which loud music was played at high volume while being blindfolded, stripped, and beaten. Okay. Even if that meant he was a member of Hamas. Let's play that game. That does not give the right for them to treat him like that. He is still a journalist. I mean, I loathe Fox News. I loathe OAN. I loathe, what's that other one? I'm blanking. I loathe them. Do I think that their journalists should be treated like this just simply for existing? No, I don't. No journalist should be treated like that, even if they are working for a terrorist organization. No, that unless they actually did something bad, something terroristy. No, they don't deserve that. Actually, I'm not entirely sure terrorists deserve that. Because if they do get out for however, that's not going to make them more wanting to be friends with Israel. It's going to make them hardened and hate Israel more. So no, torture is never a good thing, no matter what. I mean, Guantanamo Bay should have kind of given us that lesson. But, assholes will asshole. Abdel Al said he had been awakened with electric shocks or blows whenever he was close to becoming unconscious. Ugh, this is disgusting. Another testimony of a Palestinian journalist who did not want to be named for fear of being detained again described how soldiers bound his genitals with zip ties and beat him. Ew. Ew, ew, ew. The journalist said that soldiers had told him he would no longer be a man. Oh, good. They intended to chop that off. Lovely. Now, technically, that doesn't stop you from being a man, so that's wrong. However, ew, what is wrong with people? I do not care if he did anything horrible. That does not give you the right to treat them like that. These are the same people who always pound their chests, especially around Holocaust Memorial Day. They always pound their chests about never forgetting the Holocaust, never forgetting, what the Jews went through. And then they pulled this shit? I'm sorry. What are you? Is that your remembrance of the Holocaust? Never forget how you were treated, so we can take notes and treat others like that? Ew. What the hell? Other accounts in the report include violence and mental torture, including following a visit by Israel's far-right National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, whose office oversees the work of the Israel Prison Services. Yeah, he's a real piece of work. Ben-Gvir spoke often of the harsh conditions imposed on Palestinian prisoners since he took office in December 2022. Some of the Israeli hostages held by the Hamas group in Gaza said after their release that Ben-Gvir's boasting about the Palestinian prisoners' treatment had led their captors to impose worse conditions in response. I mean, again, these are people who are old enough to have personally known people who either died in the Holocaust, were victims of the Holocaust in that they survived, but were in the Holocaust, and they have no problem attacking a group of people who are weaker than them? Seriously, how does this make sense? This makes absolutely zero sense. It just, ugh. It's like they basically have lived long enough to be the villain. They might have at some point been decent people. Who knows? I mean, Netanyahu he was never great, but he seems to have gotten worse and worse and worse as time goes on. All right. Though CPJ emphasized that it could not independently verify each report, similar accounts have repeatedly been made public by human rights organizations regarding the detention conditions for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel since October 7, 2023. January's Living Hell report by the Israeli NGO, B'Tselem, I know I botched that one, includes descriptions of a similar nature, with organization head Yuli Novak telling DW that Israel's prisoners had turned into a network of torture camps. Again, when you say let's not forget the Holocaust, remember the Holocaust, is this what you meant? Seriously, how can people continue to feel, now obviously Jews outside of Israel and even inside of Israel shouldn't be blamed for their government being absolute asshats. Obviously not. But unfortunately, we live in a world where the actions of the government affect everyday citizens. I mean, let's face it. There are Americans who go overseas for vacation or work or whatever, and they are despised. Why? Because people just assume that, you know, you either agree with the government, or just because you dare to still be an American, that somehow this is going to hurt the government or something. So this thing exists. So basically, even though there are Jews in Israel and around the world who would be appalled at this is just putting them in more danger, because there are people who can't grasp that Israel and Judaism, not the same thing, as much as this administration really wants people to think that they're the same thing. Anyway, all right. In one case that made headlines in Israel and around the world, footage made public by Israeli media appears to show soldiers sexually and physically abusing a Palestinian detainee in the Sde Tayman detention center in June 2024. Israeli far-right supporters, including some high-profile members of the government, then stormed both Sde Tayman and the Beit Lid military court in solidarity with the reservists reported to have committed the abuse. I mean, what is it about the far right that makes them so angry and so violent? Because, again, especially if you are Israeli, Jews definitely, but Israeli, how can you, given how your country came to be, through anti-Semitism, but still, how your country came to be, how can you see that it's perfectly okay to treat not Nazis, but people who are weaker than you? I mean, I could understand, the punch the Nazi thing. Totally understand that. But you're basically turning into the very people that you claim to despise. And I just do not understand how that happens. You guys are the last people who should be doing that. The reservists are suspected of raping and severely abusing the Palestinian man in the video at Sde Tayman. His injuries were so serious that he had to be hospitalized. Well, sounds like he's still alive, so at least something. The case is still being discussed in Israeli courts. In November 2025, the daily newspaper Haaretz reported that the government's release of the man to Gaza as a part of the deal that secured the release of the living Israeli hostages without his providing testimony to authorities increases the likelihood that the charges will be dropped. All right. Israel's government and its official prison service has repeatedly denied accounts of abuse in the country's prisons. Right, because in their view, their shit don't stink. So they could never do anything bad, even though they've done plenty. Okay, so that is the end of that article. So moving on to the U.S. All right. This is from, let's see, WATE. And this is a news channel, but I'm not sure. WATE News, Knoxville. Okay. Bill to let private groups refuse to recognize same-sex marriage passes Tennessee House. And I hope I don't have to explain how chilling that is, because First off, we have discrimination laws. We have the fact that it's federally recognized that same-sex marriage is a thing. Just because you don't like it, doesn't mean you get to pick and choose whose marriages you're going to recognize. I mean, we could go further and go back to the people who don't recognize interracial marriage. I mean, this can get just so stupid so quick. Not that this isn't stupid, but it could get so much dumber. All right. A Tennessee bill that would allow private groups and individuals to refuse to recognize same-sex marriage passed the House Thursday after lengthy debate over its constitutionality. I'm going to say it's still not constitutional, but okay. The bill's sponsor, Representative Gino Bulso, a Republican from Brentwood, said the legislation clarifies that Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court case that granted same-sex couples the right to marry under the Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses of the 14th Amendment, only applies to the government and other public entities because only the government and public entities are bound by the restrictions in those clauses in the 14th Amendment. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you claiming that the U.S. Constitution doesn't apply to every state? It only applies to the feds? That is just bonkers. Not the most bonkers thing I've read today. The most bonkers thing I've read today is a Texas GOP candidate, I think for governor, but a Texas GOP candidate claims that Native Americans should be deported. That is the most bonkers thing I've read today, but this has got to be a close second. What the hell? Members, this is a bill that does not change existing law. It simply clarifies existing law, Bulso said on the House floor. It provides that the 14th Amendment and the U.S. Supreme Court's interpretation of that amendment in its Obergefell versus Hodges decision 2015 are not binding on private citizens. I mean, that is just insane. I mean, why don't we do that for other amendments? Why is the 14th Amendment so fucking special? That is just insane. I mean, at this point, they're actually advocating. They're actually saying the quiet part out loud that the Constitution shouldn't exist. That it has no bearing on anybody or anything. It's just a thing that happened once, and at best it's guidelines. I mean, I knew that this modern day GOP considered the Constitution toilet paper, but this person said it, admitted it, that the Constitution means nothing. All right. Lawmakers debated over the constitutionality of the proposal at length. We do not have the authority to do what we are trying to do here today, Representative John Ray Clements, a Democrat from Nashville, chair of the House Democratic Caucus, said. To characterize this or mischaracterize this as already the law and we're simply clarifying it, I think, is a gross exaggeration, not only of the power of this body, but also what we're attempting to do here, which is to deny humans, fellow citizens, equal rights. Exactly. And that's the thing about having to even have something like Obergefell. I mean, can you imagine if you are a cis straight white person? Just think about this for a moment. Your very existence is up to a popular vote. this idea that, or to legislation, this idea that that your right to exist might be taken away simply because a bunch of people are asshats, are bigots. Obviously, you can't imagine that because you have that white privilege. You have that cis straight white privilege because you live like the majority of people, especially white people. So, of course, you don't know what it's like to be discriminated against. So, you can say bullshit stuff like this because it doesn't affect you. It is maddening. No, a person's existence shouldn't be legislated on. They should just have it as that they're human beings. Oh my God. The bill passed the House largely along party lines. That should come as no surprise. Meanwhile, members of the Tennessee Equality Project watched from outside the chambers. Chris Sanders, executive director of the Tennessee Equality Project, told News 2 that while the bill likely won't change things for large private entities, including national bank branches or big healthcare systems, it would likely hurt those in rural areas where those organizations are smaller and often locally owned. Imagine if the Treasury Secretary were driving through the state of Tennessee and had an accident in a small rural county and someone refused to recognize his husband as his husband and they had to make medical decisions or wanted to visit in the healthcare facility, Sanders said. That's the kind of impact that this bill could have on anybody in a dire circumstance. Exactly. The bill's opponents worry it could open doors for further discrimination against other types of marriages, including those between biracial or non-religious couples. I didn't even think about the religion thing. But I mean, what's to stop them from trying to find out a person's religious status? Whether you're Christian, Muslim, the right type of Christian, of course, Muslim, Jew, atheist. Of course, granted, with that one, it would take more probing to find out. That would have to be more along the lines of like the healthcare system. What when they ask you what's your religion, which I was asked during my first surgery. When I had a hysterectomy, that's one of the questions they asked. And I had no problem admitting that I'm an atheist because I'm not going to be scared. So, and because my father was friends with the chaplain, he still came to visit me, but it was just a friendly chat and not at all religious because, again, he was friends with my dad. So you could find out that way. But otherwise, what's with this private citizens? I mean, are you then saying, I mean, I'm assuming you're not talking businesses now. So what? Does that mean that, well, a homeowners association is still an association. So I'm not sure exactly how it would affect private citizens. I mean, generally you pick your friends anyway. So I'm not quite sure where that would fit in. What Representative Bolso is doing today is far more sinister and extensive than simply clarifying the law, Sanders said. Who passes a law to clarify the law? This is about taking back the recognition and the impact of the Obergefell decision today. But in its language, broadly about the 14th Amendment, who knows what all it opens up? Does it get into questions of Well, maybe I don't recognize your citizenship. Bingo! Maybe I don't recognize your marriage and you're not even a same-sex couple. I mean, why not? Like I said, interracial couples. Of course, the citizenship thing, yeah. ICE is already doing that. They will, even when American citizens show that they have a passport or a real ID, or if you're naturalized, your papers, and ICE just decides, oh, we're not going to believe that you actually have legal status, so we're going to detain you in torturous conditions. So that's already a thing that's happening. But now imagine that anybody can do that. When reporters asked House Republican leadership whether the bill opens the door for further discrimination, House Majority Leader William Lamberth, a Republican from Portland, said absolutely not. Of course they wouldn't think that. House Speaker Cameron Sexton, a Republican from Crossville, refused to answer, concerned about a potential lawsuit over the bill. So he knows that this bill is all sorts of bad. Okay? That's an interesting way of admitting it, but all right. Now, do I believe that this schmuck does not believe that it would affect other situations? Yes, I do. Because I still remember about this, I think it was Idaho Republican who voted for abortion bans. And then he started hearing cases of women who needed abortions to save their lives, and realizing that the issue is much more complicated than he realized, because God forbid he would listen to people before he would make a rash decision, thinking that, oh, he's on the moral high ground and these people are just making shit up. Well, they weren't. And this sort of thing is going to come back and bite this majority leader in the ass. Now, we don't know how it's going to, but it's going to bite him in the ass. Now, it could be that people get pissed off at him, or it could be because of how crazy it gets, or it could just simply be that he finds his conscience at some point and realizes, oh. So it could be either one. Either way, he's going to get his. I would just like to say I would go back and listen to the debate, Sexton said. I'm sure there's going to be a lawsuit on this, so anything that's said is going to be part of the lawsuit. So basically, he's admitting that he is incapable of defending this bill. Because if he was capable of defending the bill, the threat of a lawsuit would not actually matter. If you had a good argument for this discrimination, but he obviously, his only argument is bigotry. So because that's all he has, he doesn't want to continue and make it obvious, so it'll make the lawsuit even easier. The Senate version of the bill has not yet been debated in committee. It must pass multiple committees before it reaches the Senate floor for final vote. And since this is Tennessee, chances are really good that it'll pass. So, yeah. All right, so that is the end of that second article. So my third and final article is from Q News. I think that's out of South Africa, but I'm not sure. Okay. This actually, I I misspoke at the beginning. I thought that all these articles were bad news. I have a good news article for you. This is a very good news article for you, especially if you live in Uganda. Voters dump Uganda's worst anti-gay MPs at election. Okay, voters in Uganda dumped 3 of the country's most outspoken homophobes when they went to the polls for national elections in January. David Bahati, Asumani Basalira, Basalira, and Sarah Opendi were responsible for championing some of the most extreme pieces of legislation targeting the LGBTQIA+ community on the African continent. Bahati introduced Uganda's first notorious Kill the Gays bill, the Anti-Homosexuality Bill 2009, which would have punished consensual same-sex relationships with up to life in prison and the death penalty for acts of aggravated homosexuality. Bahati continued pushing the bill into 2013 when a version of it was passed by Parliament in December with the death penalty removed. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni signed the bill into law in February of 2014. In response, Uganda's international development partners suspended over $140 million in aid, and the country was rebuked by world leaders. 6 months later, Uganda's constitutional court struck down the law on a technicality, finding that it had been passed without quorum by lawmakers. Lawmakers passed a similar bill in 2021, but President Museveni vetoed it as it mostly duplicated existing legislation. Asumani Basalira, why do I have a hard time with that name? Basalira, oh my God, Basalirwa, I don't get it yet, introduced the Anti-Homosexuality Bill 2023, which was seconded by Sarah Opendi, who also called for the castration of those convicted. Like David Bahati's bill, Basalira's bill prescribes the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, which again, nobody can fucking define. That bill became the Anti-Homosexuality Act 2023 when it was signed into law in May of that year. In April of 2024, Uganda's Constitutional Court upheld the law when it was challenged by activists and human rights defenders. Earlier this month, a court in Uganda threw out a case against the first person to be prosecuted under the law, which I did a video about, and that was a sad, sad case. It wasn't because they understood that the law sucked. It was because the person degraded mentally so badly that he could no longer be tried. So, yeah. The man had been arrested in August of 2023, but the court found that he was not mentally fit at the trial to proceed, as his mental health had deteriorated during his years of captivity. Okay, so that is the last of, and actually this is out of Australia. Okay, I misspoke. But anyway, unfortunately it doesn't tell us who was put in their place, and are they more LGBT plus friendly, or at least not quite as extreme anti-gay as these people. This article does not say, which is a shame, because I would love to know if this means that the situation for the LGBT plus community is going to get better anytime soon. But anyway, that is my third and last article. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.